Hello, Tolkien geeks, and welcome back to Voice of Geekdom Live. It's good to see you all on Saturday evening. We've got two fabulous guests for you today. We're here to, of course, to talk about episode 3 of The Rings of Power. We're in week 2 of the show. We've got some interesting content this week. No Elrond this week, but we got plenty more from the Southlands and quite a few plot developments with Galadriel to discuss. And the big thing, of course, is we got Numenor and we got Elendil and Queen Muriel as well. Some fascinating stuff to talk about there, and we'll get into that shortly. So on my right here is Nick Palazzo. I'm not sure on the pronunciation of your second name there, actually, Nick. Is that, have I got that right?
That was pretty spot on.
Okay.
I get a lot of mispronunciations. So when people complain about Westerners having trouble pronouncing foreign sounding names, I'm like, no, I'm right there with you. I got you.
That's Italian, presumably, I think.
Yes. Right? Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there are most often I get a lot of people adding vowels in that weren't there.
Mm-hmm. So Nick is part of the SilmFilm team. He's one of the co-hosts of the podcasts with the Tolkien Professor. Do you have like a title that you go by as far as like film?
So my role in the Silmarillion film project is I am the script editor. So essentially my job is to kind of herd the cats that are the script outline team as we go through and discuss our episodes that we're creating scene by scene, and then once that's completed, we then turn it over to one of our script writers who puts together a treatment, and we go through and help them get it polished up and get ready to be sent out to Corey and Dave Kale, who's also on the podcast. Not to mention Marie Prosser handles a lot of that back end stuff. She's the quote unquote showrunner of the Silmarillion film project. And then
I met her at Mythmoot as well.
Yes. Yes.
So you and I met at Mythmoot in DC, and I got the chance to hang out with you and your family there, and we watched the Rankin Bass Hobbit together one night, which was a blast. And so it was a really, really fun evening that night, actually.
I was not expecting to have to make the decision of, is my 3-year-old ready to watch the animated Hobbit yet? Especially since she hasn't had the book read. There's that. But I figure she's 3. She'll forget enough of it that it'll still be new to her when I read it to her probably in another 3-4 years. So.
She might have some strange images in her head when she gets to certain chapters of that book.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I did, because I'm pretty sure that I had seen that exact film when I was much younger.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, the SilmFilm project on the Signum University YouTube channel is it's a kind of entirely imaginary adaptation of the Silmarillion. So fascinating concept for a podcast. I've never seen anything quite like it, and it goes into great laborious depth in terms of casting and scripting and music and locations and all sorts. Yep. And so you actually think through scene by scene, chapter by chapter, page by page, year by year, the entire history of Middle Earth and adapting it.
I've had entire episodes of the show that are based on a single line from the Silmarillion. Wow. So basically, we take this one line and we expand that out into an hour-long episode of television. Yeah. So if there's anybody who understands the challenges of no kidding. If there's anybody who understands the challenges of adapting Tolkien, and especially the deeper cuts from the Legendarium, it's the SilmFilm team. I'm here to tell you.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you on, because you've obviously put a lot more thought into adapting Tolkien than I have, and it's going to be really interesting talking about how you guys have made decisions and how the Amazon Prime team have made similar decisions in places and possibly different decisions in others. I think there'll be an interesting conversation to have. And so below me, we've got silmaremily from Tolkien TikTok, who this is our second appearance on the channel. We talked through one of the trailers before with James Tauber from the Digital Tolkien Project. It was a few months ago now. And so that was fun. So I wanted to have you back on. And I'm excited to get into all of this. We talked about what you do on TikTok before a little bit, but I don't know if you want to introduce yourself again for people who didn't see that from the previous stream.
I make kind of all types of Tolkien content on TikTok, so I am fairly knowledgeable in lore. I did a series where I was reading through the trilogy for the first time because famously I read the Silmarillion first, and everybody looks at me like you're freaking insane for doing that. How could you? Because I tend to prefer the Silmarillion, which is a very unpopular opinion. I talk about it. I do. I mean, it's TikTok. You kind of have to do memes every once in a while, so do a little bit of that. But yeah, I've been privileged enough to attend some of the events with Amazon Prime, so I feel very lucky that I've gotten to experience Tolkien's universe in like a little bit more of a personal way now. So I'm very excited to watch the show. I thought this episode was really good, so I'm excited to be back.
So how have you felt about the show overall so far? You've been enjoying it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I had my reservations like I think most people had, but I also prefer the Peter Jackson movies to the books, and I'm not afraid to say it. I like his adaptation better. So I think maybe because I watched the movies first before I read the books might be part of it. So I definitely understand, the things that come with adapting something for television. So I haven't been as bogged down with some of the lore, time compression changes. Like I'm choosing not to focus on that and just see where the series takes me. There are things that I like, there are things that I don't necessarily like, but I mean, overall, I'm just excited that we're getting more of Middle Earth.
Coming at it from a movie fandom angle, there might be things that you dislike that maybe other people would like, and vice versa. And so
yes, exactly. Oh yeah,
I mean, kind of interesting to get perspectives like that. Yeah. And so you like Star Wars as well. So you do Star Wars content on TikTok as well, quite a bit, I've seen.
Yeah. So I'm familiar with the nasty side of the fandom. I feel uniquely experienced to kind of combating this toxic side that has arisen because I have plenty of experience with it with Star Wars.
Yeah. I do have like quite a compressed experience with that in the last year or so. So I've had to get used to it, and luckily I'm quite thick-skinned. But
I mean, you kind of have to be on the internet content creator. Like I've been doing it for like 2-ish years now. So
See, for me, like I'm old enough to have seen this already before. Now, of course, this is before the internet was such a big thing and social media wasn't really a thing. But twice, both when the prequel trilogy started coming out, I remember having very, very similar discussions to what people were having about this sequel trilogy. And now the prequel trilogy is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. And then
it's peak cinema now.
Oh,
if you ask a TikTok commenter, Revenge of the Sith is the greatest movie ever made, which is not what the consensus was when it came out, nor till up in about 5 years ago, it was still not considered that. So
I still think it sucks personally. That's me. But
and then of course in 2001 when the Lord of the Rings films came out, I refused to go and see Fellowship of the Ring for the first month or and a half it was out. That is like, I remember being there, and I remember sitting in when I finally did go see it, sitting in the seat in the movie theater, stewing and being aggravated about, you know, the absence of Tom Bombadil and what's going on with Aragorn? Why is he such a wimp? I don't understand what this problem is.
But you, at the time, you couldn't just pull out your phone and tweet about it. You had to go to like
exactly.
AOL or a message forum or something, and it's much harder to just like spew an opinion.
Well, I went right in and watched it like when it came out, but I had to decompress with my dad afterwards, and we had to discuss it at length.
So interesting. But see, like, so many trolls nowadays would completely deny that happened. That
they
was
do
a reaction, and you can be there. You can have been there and said, "No, I felt that way." And it's like they don't, like, they have blinders on. They just don't believe you. They think that Peter Jackson is canon and that he did. I've gotten comments where they're like, "He never changed anything major." I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
So when the OneRing.net made, they put out an article that had a particular line that got a lot of attention, something to the effect of the much maligned characterizations from the Jackson films, and people went berserk. They were like, "What are you talking about? Nobody had any problem with the way people characterized." And I made this whole huge Twitter thread. I was like, "No, there was this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and there was tons of stuff that we were furious about."
Yeah.
But it actually didn't damage my enjoyment of the film at the end of the day. Like, eventually I was won over by the quality of the filmmaking.
Totally.
I still, there's choices that I still don't like. I'm still not happy about it.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to fix them when we get there in the Silmarillion Film Project.
Yeah.
But, you know, but
you generally accept that, like, they're good movies. The changes he made were for, you know, whatever reason, for the sake of cinema.
Like, reasons like he didn't understand what Tolkien was trying to say. You know, that happens too. So just say. But
this is also how I'm approaching Rings of Power. You know, I am kind of looking at it as they have to make certain choices, and there's trade-offs in every choice they make, and every change they make has a ripple effect. And so you know this better than anyone, probably, Nick, but as soon as you change that, you guys change stuff as well in SilmFilm, right?
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. I had a conversation with somebody, I think it was at Mythmoot, and somebody was like, it was like, well, how would you feel about using like the Silmarillion Film Project as like a companion piece to reading the Silmarillion? And I'm just like, no, don't do that. We make stuff up. That's not, you can't, like, after you've read it a couple of times and you want to really do a deep dive into what's happening there, that's when you come to us, because we're talking through the Silmarillion on this extremely granular level, and we're having to make choices about what does this thing look like, because it's super easy for Tolkien to say, for example, that that individual werewolves were sent out from Tolungarhoth, right? And Huan kills them individually, one by one by one by one by one, until Draglodin comes out and he himself is defeated, and he goes inside and tells Sauron, "Huan is here," and he dies. And Sauron then is like, "You know what? I have a better idea. I'm going to turn into an even bigger werewolf, and I'm going to go out," and he eventually gets defeated as well. That's fine for him to say that happens, but when you start thinking through, what does that look like? Well, you wind up having to make some changes.
Oh, inevitably, because he was really specific in some places and then really vague in others.
Absolutely.
Werewolves coming out one by one by one like that is very fairy tale, isn't it? And it fits the genre that Tolkien was going through. It was aiming for. And so, but when you see that on screen, it just looks illogical. It looks like Sauron doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
Basically, it's like, it's boring to watch as well. I would think, you know.
And what we wound up doing wasn't that different. Like, the werewolves are out on patrol, you know, on the shores of the river, and you know, so you remember if you saw the episode in The Mandalorian where Ahsoka Tano was introduced, and she is like essentially hunting the bad guy soldiers in the creepy misty forest, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, that's what Huan does. You know, he
I
one
like
by
that.
one hunts the
Yeah.
werewolves that are already out.
Mhm.
And, you know, Luthien is walking through completely untouched by the hunting carnage going on around her.
Amazing.
And so, and that's a change, but I don't think it changes the tone. And I don't think it changes what Tolkien is trying to say is happening there.
And I think that's what a lot of people, I don't know if they forget or they are just not aware of that sentiment, I guess.
And so, Nick, how have you felt about Rings of Power thus far? You been enjoying it, or you kind of on the fence, or you leaning towards not enjoying it?
I was on the fence until the third episode.
Okay.
There are writing decisions that they are making structurally that cause issues as far as the pacing of their episodes go, right? And and so I can understand why somebody who is not coming in with a particularly charitable with no inclination to be charitable,
right,
might have some issues enjoying the episodes. Now, I'm in Middle Earth, right? Like I'm still having a good time because I'm in Middle Earth, but I can still recognize, okay, all right,
yeah, I agree.
But by the third episode, this past episode, I was having so much fun that even though I still noticed some of the same issues, I still had such a good time that it didn't matter.
Yeah.
My concern at the moment is that the first episode was written by the showrunners, and so the first episode was by far the weakest so far.
I agree.
And so I'm a little concerned about that because what I don't want to get is a situation like we got in the last season of Game of Thrones, where the showrunners basically took over. And I don't think that will happen necessarily because we know that they have a 5-year plan and that we know that that's the run at the moment. And if that gets extended, then the plan may change. But as it stands, we expect the current writing room to be the writing room throughout, more or less, with one or two changes perhaps along the way. But I don't expect the showrunners to take over in the same way or to compress the end of the story so that they can go and do something else. But
so, question: you said that you found the first episode to be the weakest. What if you had to put your finger on what that weakness is, forgetting the fact that it's an adaptation of Tolkien, taking that out of the mix, just as a television episode itself, what do you find that weakness to be?
I think the tone of it was a bit inconsistent, is what I would say. There were scenes that were very somber, and then there were other scenes that just seemed to just fly in the face of the tone that they'd set elsewhere. And so because they were jumping from location to location and doing this world building, it felt a little inconsistent.
So,
combined with that was the main. I'm looking at Galadriel as being the main character at the moment, and I find that certain elements of her setup thus far have been a little contrived in places.
Can I share something with you if I can find it?
If you're able to, I'm not actually sure whether guests are able to share things.
I have a button for it, so let me just see if I can find this thing.
Give it a go. Maybe it'll ask me if you have permission or not. I don't know.
Yeah,
I've never actually tried.
Let me see if I can pull this up, and in the meantime, I will move.
While you're doing that, I'll just say shortly we are going to get into the episode, and we'll try and talk it through roughly scene by scene. I don't have any screenshots to show you. We won't be going through it shot by shot or anything, or we'll be here for hours and hours. But I think we'll try and talk through every big scene in the episode. And hi to everybody in the chat, by the way. We've got 21 people watching currently. So if anybody is on social media or whatnot, please feel free to share this around, and hopefully we'll get some more numbers in. We've got Matthew in the chat. We've got Kate Batitsky. we've got Kugelblitz. Kugelblitz actually was kind of bantering you, Emily, a little bit when you said that that you preferred the Peter Jackson movies to the to the books. He shouted sacrilege, and
I know.
and then he said Revenge of the Sith greater than Return of the Jedi, which I would say sacrilege right there.
Yeah,
Return
like
of the
how
Jedi may be the weakest of the original trilogy, but it's still
the kettle back a little bit there.
But yeah, your mileage will vary, and yeah, if you are in the chat and if you're listening, just give us a shout and just say you're here, and if you haven't chatted yet, just let us know where you're watching from as well, because I always like to know where people are watching from. We've got Alison here, and Claire, and Maylena. There's a new name on me, I think. Maylena Litchfield. It's nice to see you. And so, as we go through the plot of the episode, we'll take questions from the chat as much as possible. If you want your question to be highlighted on screen and for us to linger on it, and we want us to treat it as a priority, the super chat function is open, which is also a great way to support the channel and for me to bring you more content in the future. So bear that in mind, and hopefully we will be able to have some good interactions with all of you watching. I think Nick has got his
there we go
chart on screen here.
Okay,
so I'm going to maximize my screen here so I can see what this is potentially.
Yeah, I can probably zoom in on a little bit. This is actually a chart that I created for a video that is currently almost finished rendering right now. This actually, you can kind of see the structure of why there's a problem, why you felt like there was a bit of tonal whiplash here. Okay, so you have the beginning sequence here with Galadriel. Let's see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. There we go. This is all Galadriel stuff. All right. And she has a beginning, middle, and end full story that starts and finishes. Right.
I like Utumno there in quotation marks.
Yes. Okay, it's the very first episode of the very first season of the show. It's not that weird that happens. Okay. That's perfectly normal.
Yeah, I said to people at the premiere after it came out, I spoke to Sarah Brown, actually. She was right there when I came out. I hadn't met her before, but I kind of knew her from Twitter, so I had a chat with her about it. And I think the first thing I said was, felt very piloty, you know?
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then we move into this section here. So that part there took up like about a quarter of the episode. The next quarter of the episode is taken up where we get the Harfoots, we get Elrond, we get current day Galadriel story, right? And all that is ramping up. So everything where you see a green bar under it, that's all set up. Yellow and orange are rising action. So basically the tension level is being increased over the course of the episode. Then about 35, 36 minutes in, we make a switch to the Southland story, which starts from the beginning and goes through its setup and rising action phases, right? So the whole episode grinds to a stop to bring us the Southlands. Now, here's the thing. They do this a couple of other times. They do something very similar in episode 3, and it didn't bother me because I was having too much of a good time, right? But this is something that can throw people off because it causes people to kind of have to stop and think about where they are now, right? And then after they get on their way to Hordern, we resume everything else, right? And so if you felt like the tone of the show felt mismatched at times, this is why.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's a bad show. That's not what I'm saying, by the way.
This is a really good graphic. It's like very easy to understand.
Well, I've been doing this for a little while.
Cool. All right. So I think we'll get into episode 3, which is what we're here to talk about. And we start off with Arondir being dragged through the old camp, which is a very graphic scene. Feels very gritty and very physical. I love this actor so far. Actually, I'm enjoying a lot of his stuff. He has great gravitas, and he feels very authentically elvish to me.
Yes,
more so than a lot of the other elf actors. So
yeah.
Aside from maybe Elrond, I think he's my favorite elf so far.
Yeah, I was so surprised to see his buddy back.
Yes, I was like, wait,
yeah.
Like I thought we were done with him. I thought we were never going to see that man again.
I was very shocked to see them there. I wonder, like, what happened. I guess they were retreating and got captured. Like, how did they end up there too? It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I was so surprised, and I was really impressed with the guard captain, the watch captain, his boss, who in the first episode was like, "Ooh, this guy's super racist." Okay, but he kind of redeemed himself as a person, which I think says something about what they're saying about people. They're saying that you can have the wrong attitudes about things and still be a decent person who can do heroic things. You know, which, I mean, Boromir is a perfect example of that sort of thing.
That's a great example. I was thinking of Thingol as an example of somebody who has some really problematic attitudes especially to race, actually. But also it was a fairly good king and like brave, and I mean, he was a middling king, let's say. He had his moments, I'll say.
It helps that his people practically worshipped him, maybe because after he went missing, he came out of the forest with a literal goddess on his arm. Might have something to do with it.
Okay, well,
yeah, who he wasn't great at listening to, and had some issues, but there's a little bit of an unfortunate marriage dynamic between the two, but skating over all of his personal issues, I do think that he is portrayed as being a noble and good king, for the most part,
but
by Tolkien.
But notice the way that the watch captain dies.
Same way as Boromir.
Exactly.
It was. I had the same feeling that they were trying to draw parallels between that arc, although I mean much shorter, obviously.
Oh yeah. But I think that there are moments where they're trying to tell us it's going to be okay.
Yeah,
we've got you.
Yes,
like we know what's important. We understand what's important about this.
Yeah, it's fan service without being like so overt.
Kate here in the chat is saying, funny how Arondir probably would have been captured either way. That is true. That is true. He would have ended up in the same place regardless, although he did have a little bit more information in that he knew that the tunnels extended all the way to that town called Horden, was it?
Horden, which I have it on good authority is probably named after the voice actor for Gandalf on the BBC radio adaptation. If I may be getting all of those pieces of information wrong, but in there somewhere is, I think, a correct statement.
Okay, interesting. I did not know that.
That's the Brian Sibley BBC radio one.
Yeah.
Right. It's funny. I met him actually the other week at the premiere, so that was cool. I'd never met him before. So nice guy. He was telling a funny story about being on the red carpet for the Lord of the Rings movies because he wrote the movie guide to the Lord of the Rings movies. So he was there on the red carpet, and people were not recognizing him on the carpet, but getting him to sign his own book with his name on it, and not knowing who he was. And he had to explain, this is my name on this book that you're getting me. Like, it was quite amusing.
It is Michael Horden, by the way. That's the name of the guy. So I'm pretty sure that's where the name comes from.
Cool. I didn't know that. Nice bit of trivia there.
Yeah.
So it was a cool scene. I think Adar was mentioned in the scene. And so this is the Elvish word for father. the character that we will see in a blurry shot at the end
Oh,
of the
I know.
episode. And it was quite a clever title, actually, because fatherhood in general was kind of a theme for this
Yes.
episode as well, when we get to
I love
Elendil later on,
Yeah.
especially.
Mhm.
I was
that.
really, because I've always associated Adar as being kind of the more familiar, or like it's like daddy, right?
Yeah.
And so that was my impression, which could be false. But so when I saw the episode title, it's like, oh, that's probably about Elendil. That's so sweet.
Mm.
And then no, it's not.
At all.
It's not sweet at all. That's terrifying.
Yeah. It's very, I loved that Elendil like points out, like, why are they using an Elvish word for father? Like, he clocks that and is like, that's important somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the fandom has been saying for a while, ever since this character was first rumored. I knew about him before he was even rumored, because I'm friends with people and I heard things, and so I knew this character was coming.
Yes.
Well, not
we won't-
knowing anything, I'm gonna stand my ground and say that he is not Sauron.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think he is either. I think they're gonna wait. That's what I've been saying. I mean, since the whole mix up with the trailer and the shaved hair person, I was like, y'all, they're not gonna reveal this big bad villain in a trailer, and they're definitely still not gonna do it in the third episode. I think that's a later in the season kind of a reveal, if they do it this season at all.
Yeah, I think if it's this season, it'll be like the final shot of the finale.
Yeah. Yes.
Like that's my, TV brain working there, because that seems to be the thing to do. If you're going to set up a villain who we all know from the books and the movies, and then set up this kind of mystery box of where is he and how do we find him and track him down and what is his plan, and then not show him on screen for 3 episodes, it's going to be something that they're going to build, and so you have to think that they've got some kind of cliffhanger in mind for the finale. So it makes sense to me. But we should move on because we've got a lot to get through. So we cut to Galadriel and Halbrand on the Númenórean ship, and so there's a fun scene where she wakes up, and I was enjoying Halbrand more in this episode, actually. He sarcastically sort of says, "Oh, you're kind of not dead yet, then." And she wakes up, and he hands her a dish of food, and she sort of eyes it suspiciously, and don't worry, it's not poisoned, at least not for humans. And so they have this running kind of banter all the way through. I am getting kind of wiggy feelings about Halbrand a little bit. I'm starting to think that there's this rumor that he is Sauron in disguise, which I don't believe at this point. I don't think we have sufficient evidence, and I think there's significant evidence that if he is Sauron, he's a very incompetent portrayal of Sauron.
I feel like if he were Sauron, he would look fairer and feel fouler.
Yeah, and
he's certainly not who he seems, though. I personally
no. Well, I mean, there's a reveal later on in the episode about that.
Yeah.
And whether or not we can believe his, response is another question. But I don't think that we're being set up for a Sauron character. But I do think that we are being set up for a tragic character that is going to have an evil end potentially.
Oh, yeah. It's going to make me sad. I already know.
Yeah, Witch King, or another Nazgul, or perhaps the king in the mountain as well. Some people have been suggesting the king of the Oathbreakers as a potential possibility, because
that's a good one.
He, as they're going to reveal later on when we'll get to it, he's going to be revealed as the heir to the Southlands potentially, which is a kind of a storyline that the Amazon people have made up. But you could replace him and his society in the White Mountains later on in the show, and he could take on that role.
The line that he had, what tipped me off that it was going to turn out that he was an heir of some kind back in episode 2 was when he said, my land has no king. And I was like, oh, Gondor has no king. Gondor. Okay, so that's where that's going. Okay,
definitely.
And it could be the other thing as well. The guy in the Southlands village, the Theo's kind of
Is that the same guy?
obnoxious friend.
Rowan, I think is the character's name.
Rowan,
Is the same guy in the barn as in the bar?
I think so. Yeah,
The butcher bar, I should say.
Yeah. I wasn't sure what to call that. I made notes on that episode, and I was like, "What is this location?" It's
owned by the butch tender. Yeah,
meat hanging up. People are drinking. I said tavern in the end, but I wasn't sure whether that was the right term. So yeah, that character, he had a line about when our king returns, then we will be out from under your pointy boots, kind of thing. So that tipped me off that there was a king somewhere out there, and I think we've got our prime candidate. Although he does say to Galadriel in the scene later on in this episode that he says, "I took it from a dead man." And one wonders whether he was telling the truth when he said that, because he certainly is duplicitous enough to be able to hide a lie with the truth like that. And he does seem very silver-tongued. Not Sauron silver-tongued, but he certainly does have a bit of a gift of gab about him. So they come to shore, and they're taken to an audience with Queen Muriel. And so we introduced to the Queen Regent character. And so there's a very confrontational scene between her and Galadriel, which
was so feisty.
It was. I'm not sure whether feisty is the word. I mean, Galadriel hasn't learned the art of diplomacy yet.
No,
that's clear.
Because she's never met anybody that she couldn't personally like. Because she doesn't feel like these people are any serious threat to her.
Yeah.
This is the person that thought they were going to swim across the ocean, apparently, by the way. There is a possible explanation as to why she thought that was possible, because she's actually swimming the wrong way. There's the shot where she's looking up at the sky, and you see the Big Dipper in the sky, the Valakirka, right? And which is in the northern sky, and you can actually see where the northern star is from that shot. And then she turns around and swims back in the opposite direction. She's actually swimming south. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but at least she's not like obviously swimming across thousands of miles of wide open ocean.
Yeah, still not her best plan that she could have come up with to get all the way to the mystical entrance to Valinor, whether you want to call it the straight road or whether it's just the mists of whatever it is. I'm on the record for disliking that scene for the visual element of it appearing like a portal, by the way, but getting all that way and then jumping overboard, not her finest hour.
Hubris is definitely her defining characteristic at this point. And
at this point is the critical thing, I think.
Yeah. And I think that tracks for so when people are like, this isn't anything like the Galadriel that I read about, did you read about Galadriel? Because it kind of does track. Like the whole bit where she is still considering taking the ring from Frodo when he offers it to her. Like it's still on the table until the moment she says no.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's definitely still the same characters very early on in her arc, which is intentional. It would be boring if the whole series was just her and Lothlorien with Celeborn. Like nobody would want to watch that, whether or not they say they do or not. Like that, there would be no character growth in that.
So what did we think of Muriel? Any thoughts on her so far? I mean, it's the scene later on, which is really interesting, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
I actually have a quotation from Unfinished Tales about that I want to bring up, because we don't see Tar Palantir off screen, and you wonder whether we'll see him season 2 potentially, or whether he has to die at some point presumably, but that was intriguing. But in this first scene with her, she is very much playing the statesman, and she's kind of playing to her audience, it feels like.
Yeah.
She's, in a sense, trapped by her position on a certain level. So there's this whole subplot about her father having been forced to abdicate the throne because of his loyalty to the elves, and she has to avoid that, the appearance of that at all costs. So whether she's conflicted about what her position is or she's just hiding it isn't super clear yet.
Yeah.
But I think that we will find that out pretty soon.
Yeah. I think I went back and forth about her for the same reason.
Yeah. Which is quite a good setup, actually, because they're not setting up a mystery, but they are making it ambiguous at the moment. And so this is where our intrigue is in this show at the moment.
That she attempts.
It's where it should be, is where the intrigue should be at this point in the story, I think, in Numenor, in the political system there. And what we didn't get was very much of Pharazôn yet. But we know he's going to be a factor. And, they've kind of... What we did get is we got a shot of him kind of with some of the guild masters there in Numenor, and he seems to be the master of all the guilds because he has the lapels that Halbrand is going to steal one later on. He seems to have all of them already, and so it seems to be that he's connected with all of the industries in Numenor.
That I think I remember reading something about that. Yeah, the fact that Muriel attaches Elendil to Galadriel while seemingly harboring suspicions that he is an elf sympathizer suggests pretty heavily that there's at least some conflict in her in her ideas about this, because she didn't have to do that. There's no reason for her to do that unless she specifically wants to have somebody who is elf adjacent dealing with this elf.
Yeah. I got that question as well.
Just catching up on the chat here. Brief Mortal 11 says, hello, first time at your live stream. Struggling a little with reconciling Galadriel's portrayed character with someone who spent a few hundred years hanging out with Melian.
Someone like Thingol, maybe? Just saying, that's spending a few hundred years hanging out with Melian is not a guarantee of being a nice person. Just say.
Or a wise person, particularly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she has a long way to go. It depends how you see Galadriel and her various backstories as well, because you can certainly make a case for her learning a lot from Melian. Certainly, the way that she sets up her own kingdom in Lothlorien with the kind of the magical protection that she has is very reminiscent of the Girdle, and so you have that connection in your head with those two characters. But that's different from saying that she learned patience and diplomacy and strategy.
The fear that the local humans have towards Lothlorien is not suggestive of a perfectly peaceable and amicable relationship over the years of history.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something, Emily?
I would just I guess reiterate what I had said before, which is like if you're expecting her to have already been this wise, capable, she's not brash, she's not feisty in any way, I would just say, like, well, then where would she go from there? Like that, this is an adaptation. That would be really boring if she was already the same Galadriel we see thousands of years later.
Yeah, Kugel Blitz is saying, Nick is right, they don't even let non-elves into Lorien.
That was that whole point of that part in the Fellowship.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on again. So we cut to Isildur, and he's at sea, and he's seemingly part of, I'm going to call them the Guild Adventurers. And so that's as a reference to the Eldarion and Durendis story. And so he seems to be a seaman, although he's clearly, from this first scene, he's not a natural.
He's lower down also.
He's a kind of an apprentice trying to earn his stripes, and this is talked about, and his friends all talk about their kind of career ambitions. But he's daydreaming and kind of hears somebody calling his voice, which was intriguing. Sort of, it made me think first of all of like the Ring in the Peter Jackson movies, the way it was like calling his name out. But I think what they were going for was kind of like the aspect of sea longing, maybe. But I don't know.
Did you also notice that his friend calls his name in the exact same tone that Elrond does at Mount Doom in the film?
Yeah,
Isildur!
I cracked up. I think that was that had to be a deliberate Easter egg.
They had to coach him on that delivery, that line.
Yeah.
Here, listen to this audio clip and say it just like this.
Right. So Isildur is introduced at sea, and then he gets to shore, and we meet his sister, who is there to meet him when he arrives. And so she seems to be popular with the other sailors.
Yeah, I liked that you could tell that they were really close friends, that they're joking with his sister.
Right.
And I felt like that was pretty tastefully done, because that could have gotten either really ugly or really antiseptic real quick. Like either they would have had no contact with her whatsoever, or they would have been really bawdy with her, which, having worked with plenty of guys like that, I can tell you is a thing that happens. And I felt like they were a little flirty with her without being aggressively so.
No, I took that as like a very like safe, like putting myself in her position. Like I wouldn't be like, I don't like these guys of your friends. Like she almost kind of like, her retort back to them makes it seems like they're, maybe just as much her friends as they are his.
I didn't understand that actually when she said or to be young. It's like what does that mean?
Maybe it's like a saying there. I'm not sure.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, she so I liked that scene. It kind of humanized them as a group and introduced the family unit, at least the children. We're going to get much more on these children later on. We got a lot of Elendil in this episode. We get a scene later on where we get them as a family group. But
I have to say I preferred that scene to this one, because this one just kind of read kind of flat to me. Nothing happens.
Yeah,
nothing happens.
Right, and that's okay.
Not every kind of introduce her, I think.
Right. Yeah. So
fair enough. So we next get the scene with Elendil and Muriel, and so
which I really like that scene in particular.
This is where she questions him about his name, and so it's a nice way of setting up the kind of factions in Númenor. So we've of course got the Kingsmen, and we've got the Faithful. Elendil being one of the latter, being the leader of the latter in theory, although we don't know whether his dad is still around or not yet. So I don't know whether they'll touch on that at some point or not. But
he seems young enough that he should be.
I think so. Yeah, in theory he should be. In the books, his father, of course, sails off to try to warn the Valar about Pharazôn's, spoiler alert for people who don't know the books, but the Pharazôn's impending invasion of Valinor that he launches later on. And so he disappears without a trace, and we never know what happens to him. But he was the leader. He should be the leader of the Faithful at this point. But he has not been introduced and has not been cast so far as we know. So I think they'll probably just wrap that whole character into Elendil's character. And we might get something like that happen, but they might just skip over that. And so we'll just have Elendil as the figurehead of that faction.
Yeah, although it doesn't seem like that's the case now, because he's like actively telling his kids, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
In the past, essentially.
So these are changes. And so it's the big change, of course, as well, is that Muriel doesn't know who he is, and she should do probably. Because it's mentioned that he was once of a noble house, which was kind of it was the only line in this scene. Well, it was in the preceding scene with Pharazôn, which I disliked a little, because there was just a clumsiness to that line, because it sort of it told you that he was once of a noble line. It sounds like he's
not anymore.
Not anymore. Does it mean that the line is not noble anymore? Because how does that happen? It's a bit peculiar.
Yeah.
I needed more context to that statement.
Yeah. I think it's a result of them maybe not being able to give more context. I'm not sure exactly
perhaps
how the rights would work with that explanation, but or maybe it's just a way to kind of allude to it to the fans, but for the people that are watching for the without any previous knowledge, it's not super important to the understanding of the scene or the character.
So the delivery of the sword thing is something that I'm like, because it seems almost impossible that that's not meant to be Narsil, right?
I think it is, yeah.
So they go out of their way to show them handing Elendil the sword. It has the open pommel, which is reminiscent of the sword from the Peter Jackson films. Go. Sorry.
No problem.
So anyway, there are children in this house, by the way. So they make a big point of handing him the sword, but it's also not as big a point as I would have expected for it to be Narsil, because now of course they may not be going with Narsil was once the sword of Ignor, the love interest of Andreth, that may not be what
forged by Telkar in the depths of time.
Right.
Actually, they do have the rights to that line, because that is in the Lord of the Rings. So in theory, they could say that.
Yes, but it seems as though this is kind of the mark of his rank, the post captain rank, right? That he mentions to Isildur. And if that's the case, I'd be a little disappointed that they're erasing the lineage of Narsil. Now, it may not be Narsil. It may just be meant to evoke Narsil and to make people think, hey, is that Narsil? But I don't know. It's hard to say.
We'll know when we get to the War of Last Alliance.
If he still has that sword.
Talk to me in 5+ years' time and we'll find out. But I do think that it was meant to at least evoke Narsil, as you say, because of it did have a kind of insignia on it, which was kind of reminiscent of some of the ideas of Narsil, like the sun and the stars on it kind of make me think of how it's reforged as Anduril in Lord of the Rings, with this similar kind of design on the blade. So yeah, I do think so, but it's kind of a cop-out kind of to just have her hand it to him like that. But the camera lingering on it was
like it was clearly important. Right? So
we also saw that sword in one of the posters, the hand posters. So it wasn't a surprise to see that sword be kind of highlighted like that. But I was surprised to see her just casually hand it over. So we didn't talk about the scene, of course, with Galadriel and Halbrand and him stealing the dagger back from Elendil. That was kind of fun. A lot of people are saying there's a little bit of chemistry between these characters, and that some of the marketing material seems to be teasing a potential relationship.
I think the marketing is trying to make it think that way, but I don't think the marketing team and the directors and showrunners and writers are totally separate entities. So I think maybe the marketing sees that as a way to kind of evoke discourse about it. But I don't know. I don't think that's what they're doing. I think if it is, it's probably one-sided. I don't think it will be something that Galadriel plays into. I think it could be so that Halbrand's trying to make her, like whether or not has this grand plan or anything.
Well, the way he does pull her towards him is a little bit not flirtatious, but aggressive in a kind of I'm a bad man kind of way.
Looks or but I don't think the writers would go so far as to make them. I mean, I think people are going to ship them either way, But I don't think the writers are intending that to be.
I'd be very surprised to see Galadriel reciprocate, as you say.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, she's a lot more weirdly intimate with Elrond in the first episode than she is with Halbrand. Like, they're like, she's touching his face, and it's like, you're his mother-in-law. That's weird.
I guess not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Potentially in the timeline that they've constructed.
Maybe. And maybe they don't do that. I don't know.
I'd be fascinated to see how they'll handle Celebrian.
Yeah.
But it's like, if they don't do that, that kind of takes a little bit of the juice out of the Galadriel is Arwen's grandmother, and she's actively engaged in trying to get her and Aragorn together.
Yeah.
All right. So we cut back to Arondir in camp, and he starts discussing the situation with the other elves, and this is where we meet his friends. His friend Maythor is killed by one of the orcs. I tweeted yesterday about the orcs. Why is it that orcs are always cockneys in Tolkien adaptations? As a Londoner, I always notice it, and it's always just, I mean, in the books, they are kind of, at least the Mordor orcs, I do think they are kind of portrayed as kind of working class British. They call each other lad and stuff like that, which, but it's not necessarily a Cockney thing. It's just, but they're always kind of Cockneys, and it's just funny.
I mean, I love the practical orcs. I recognize that Brophy orc that there were whispers of, so that was exciting. I think I'm glad that they're making them scary. I feel like, especially in Lord of the Rings, they were sort of a joke, like with the way, I mean, Gimli and Legolas do kind of have this competition in the books as well, but they made the orcs seem like battle droids, like just so easy to take down. Like they're not scary. They are just, they look kind of gross, but
unless they're named. If they're named, then they're hard to kill, apparently.
Right. But all the little other guys are not as scary. So I appreciate that they're kind of adding this like horror element into it a little bit, where like the anticipation when they're taking the sips of the water, and you're like, there's something wrong with the water. Like, what's going on? I was like sitting there.
This is a bad idea.
This is not going to be good.
The guy who played Peter Jackson's Shagrat in the movies was at the red carpet in London. I met him. We didn't know who he was, and then he said the line from The Return of the King. Don't remember which line he actually said now, but I wondered whether we'll see him at some point in prosthetics as well. That'd be fun.
That's cool.
But I too liked the way they looked, although I do wonder whether they could be wearing sort of heavier cloaks. I appreciate it's probably quite hot down there in the Southlands, maybe, but maybe that's why. But it seems like they don't have the best protection from the sun that they could have.
Cloth hoods.
That one leader orc is noticeably wearing one of the helms from the Great War, from the
not quite Hill of the Slain. Yes,
exactly.
And then there's also one of them that's wearing one of the elves' chest plates, kind of broken into bits, but
And let's take notice of the fact that helmet has got to be super old, right? And it's clear that at the very least the watch captain does not think that orcs are Longaval in the same way that elves are. You know, that they are not like perpetually existing in the same way that elves do, because he seems to think that they're all quite young in comparison to the tree. But that's not exactly a decided question in Tolkien stories, because there's even some textual evidence that Shagrat and Gorbag remember the first age, and there's some evidence that the Great Goblin remembers the first age. I don't know. Nobody seems to know, but it's all like
the lifespan of orcs, the natural lifespan.
Well, Tolkien himself certainly didn't know. I mean, it's very clear from the end of from Morgoth's Ring. The kind of back and forth that he had on the orcs is it was never solved, and it's possibly unsolvable. But
right.
But yeah, I did enjoy the orcs, and I enjoyed the portrayal, and they were menacing, and that was nice.
Yeah.
I thought it was some amazing acting by Ismail too, when his friend, collapses, and you see just, I don't know, all the emotions on his face it's been very moving to me.
Yeah.
His performance in this episode.
That what drives him to go and agree to destroy the tree with the axe of uselessness +5. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, that's G, because I was like, confused for a second, and then I was like, oh my gosh, he's a genius, because they said they were trying to get up above the trenches no matter what to see where the tree line was.
Yeah.
And I did appreciate his kind of gesture to the tree. As like, I seemed like he was apologizing.
Oh yeah,
the tree.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I saw a translation of it. I don't recall. I didn't translate it myself, but he says something like "Please forgive me" or something along those lines. In Quenya, I believe, which was interesting choice to have a Sylvan elf speaking Quenya is a bit odd.
I think so. There's like on if you're watching Amazon on a computer, not on your TV, these little like, I forget what they're called. It's sort of, when you pause and you see the actors in the scene, a little thing pops up, and I believe Elendil grows up.
I think it was mentioned somewhere that he was in Linden at some point, or in Australia.
He's kind of like born in the first age around Linden. I think that makes slightly more sense why he would stay in Quenya, possibly. I think that's maybe the explanation they're going for.
It's important to note that the Elves of Linden are not exclusively Noldor, because they're essentially all of the elven refugees of Beleriand who gathered on the southwestern shore in this last bastion of elvendom after Morgoth has completely taken over the entire continent. And those folks are the ones who wind up populating Linden, right?
And the majority of those are from either Doriath or Gondolin.
Yeah.
And
Gondolin has a huge
the havens population of Sirion.
Yeah. Yes,
because they head there first and then they end up in Linden later.
Yeah.
So I mean, they did market him as being Sylvan, which would imply that he would be speaking a Sylvan dialect of Sindarin, and there's been a lot of Quenya in this whole show so far.
Yeah.
One other consideration with this is that Quenya is more developed as a language, so it's easier to write stuff in Quenya that is kind of fully formed. I'm not an expert in the linguistics of Tolkien, but that is my understanding. We seem to have lost Emily. She's dropped out of the studio completely, so hopefully she'll be back at some point.
Yeah, she looked like she was having some trouble.
So, yeah, her picture is freezing up a little, so perhaps it's internet issues. But hopefully we'll get her back for you. Do you want to move on to the next scene, or do you have anything else to add?
No.
Okay. So there's the scene with the water flask, and Maethor, the elf buddy, is kind of killed off. And then we cut back to Elendil and Galadriel, and Galadriel kind of questions him, and she sort of demands to be let free. She's escaped at this point, and he catches up with her, and he reveals, interestingly, that he speaks Elvish and that it's still taught in the Hall of Lore, and that you can still see Elvish insignia around the city, and that there is still an element of Númenórean society that is more open to Elvendom, which, as you know, people who know this character from the books, is not a huge surprise, but it was a nice early reveal of that, and quite well explained.
Yeah, and I like their interaction. I felt like that's the way that they talk to each other is exactly the way I would have expected. I love the joy that she expresses when they're riding out to the out toward the Hall of Lore. I felt like that slow-mo shot could have been cut a little bit sooner, but like I get what they're doing there. Hello.
Sorry.
Hi, welcome back.
Hi, you snuck up on me.
So I got booted.
We're just up to the scene with Elendil and Galadriel, and he catches up with her, and And she's escaped, and she's trying to hijack a boat, and he catches up with her and explains about the Hall of Lore and how Elvish is still taught. We were just talking about the riding scene, actually, the slow motion riding scene, which
has been very controversial. Apparently,
what that scene itself.
Yes, I think the most criticism I've seen about this episode so far has been that scene.
I mean, okay,
your timeline is different than mine because I haven't seen a whole lot.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I can tell you that I felt like that slow-mo shot could have been cut quite a bit sooner. I was glad to see it, but I didn't have to see it quite that long, because the longer you're in that shot, the dumber it looks. Which is this is the problem with slow-mo in general. Like it's one of the big problems with a lot of the DCEU movies is that there's so much slow-mo that it starts to look kind of dumb. You know, in my opinion, I your mileage may vary, as you say, but if people are, again, this is the thing, like if people are approaching the show without any desire or impetus to be charitable, I can understand why that would put someone off.
I honestly didn't think, like, I saw it and I didn't think much of it. Like, I just sort of was like, okay, this is like, it didn't affect me one way or the other. When I saw that people were talking about it and I went back and rewatched it, I was like, I mean, it's a dumb thing to be mad about, but like I could see where it was a little, I guess, corny.
Yeah. And so, like, when it first came on the screen, it brought a smile to my face. I was like, oh, look, she's having fun. That's great. That's the first time we've seen her smile that way. To see her express that much joy was really nice. And then after probably about 5 or 6 seconds, I was like, okay, I got it. Like, she's having a good time. I get it. You know? So,
we've had so much Galadriel angst that it was kind of nice to break that up a little.
Right.
At some
And
point.
I think it did point to what Halbrand was saying to her earlier, where it's like, I'd like to find some peace, like you could do with some too. Where it's like, okay, she's found a little bit of this peace, and also, I feel like kind of building this relationship of trust between her and Elendil. Like she's just kind of threatened him and had this conversation, and him taking her there and giving her this little piece of joy, I think is important for their relationship.
And I think it speaks volumes for Elendil's character that he doesn't take the bait on the threat. Like she literally pulls a knife on him. The knife that he had is in his possession, right? Like, and he's been going around wondering what happened to I had it on me. Oh, okay, there it is. Right. And he doesn't draw his weapon. He doesn't react in any way. So he's a confident guy.
Yeah.
Right.
I
like he's not
see the Aragorn, like how they say Aragorn is the most like Elendil in this whole line. And I definitely can see that in his demeanor.
Yeah.
I think Elendil was MVP of this whole episode, actually. I liked Arondir a lot as well, but I think I really like Elendil, and thus far he's been one of my favorite characters in the whole run. And the lovely thing about that is we'll get to see him right until the end. Nearly. Near enough.
Pretty much we have to.
And so let's move on again. The next scene really is these two characters again in the Hall of Lore, which I think we should talk about quickly, because there's a lot of little Easter eggs in there for Tolkien, lore fans and book fans. We get the kind of the sigil of Elendil at one point in there, and then we see the picture of Elrond and Elros, which definitely the fact that they mentioned Elros and kind of explained Elrond's connection to the line of kings, which is
I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting any of the name drops that we got, especially because in the trailer, there was a trailer where Galadriel says the Golden House, and it stops it there, and people were outraged, and I was like, well, kind of unfounded because she does say Finarfin. But I was definitely not expecting her to go so deep in, the Noldor Finarfin connection. So.
Yeah, it's the first time we've had the name Noldor actually mentioned in that earlier scene, which I was surprised by because they've kind of shied away from really explaining the divisions of the elves and how that works in the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I was not expecting the Elros name drop, and then they give us the portrait, and I was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I really like Elendil's realization. Like, that's right. You would have known Elros. Like, to him, he's this mythological
He's
figure.
so far back in their family.
Right.
You know, statues of him are like
right.
eroding.
Like, oh, that's right. You knew him. It's kind of like the bit in Captain America: Civil War where Steve Rogers mentions Tony Stark's father, and he's like, "Oh, did you know him? Oh, he never mentioned that only 1,000 times, right?"
Yeah.
And it's kind of a little bit like that. By the way, that scene that's depicted in the tapestry there, the farewell of Elros and Elrond, that scene is it's very similar to a scene that's actually in the pilot script for the Silmarillion film project. So just shameless plug there. Anyway.
Just quickly, I want to pick up on something from the chat here. Dan Edwards, he's talking to somebody else in the chat here, but he's responding in here and saying, I thought I read somewhere, possibly Fellowship of Fans, that the showrunners implied to wait until the second season for Celeborn to show up. I expect we'll see him in Eregion. Eregion makes sense. We don't know, but I do have on good authority from somebody who has met the showrunners that we will be seeing Celeborn at some point. I probably shouldn't say too much more than that because the person I'm talking about is under an NDA to not talk about it. But Emily, you were there, so you can maybe talk about it or not, or decide whether or not you can confirm that or deny it. But I've heard that we will be seeing Celeborn and that they do have plans for him. So
there was an interview where I think it was Clifford asked Morfydd in an interview, "Where's Celeborn?" like straight up, and she was like, "Well, there are 5 seasons of the show, so." I don't know.
Of course, they're not going to completely leave out Celeborn. That would be bizarre.
Yeah.
So I told Corey Olson, like, I have one question for the guy playing Gil-galad. Who's your daddy? Which is the most important question you could ask about Gil-galad.
Yes.
And apparently, the actor is under the impression that his father is Fingin.
Okay. Is that because he's read the Silmarillion and that he's the father in the Silmarillion?
I don't
because
know
it's been decided.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know that for sure.
That's
an interesting one.
They told him to play from that parentage.
All right, so let's move on. We cut back to Halbrand, and we get Halbrand, and he's looking for a job in Numenor. He's looking for a fresh start, but he can't find a job as a blacksmith because he doesn't have the correct qualifications.
And so that's keeping him down.
That's a little hint for me. Like, I thought it's very suspicious that the first thing he wants to do is smithy. Like, I just was like, seems very Sauron-esque. Like, I don't know why else he would be so, like, trying so hard to do this. I don't know.
But the try-harding nature of it is what makes me like, no.
Okay. I was like, whether or not that is, I feel like they are trying to make us think.
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah, this is kind of the style of this show, I think. They've kind of setting up little red herrings, and most of them are innocuous enough that they're not going to be jarring when they turn out to not pan out. Right. I made a video last week about the Stranger, who we'll get to in a bit, about how there's kind of little bits of evidence either way about him. He could be an evil character, could be a wizard. They've kind of hinted at Gandalf, and people are talking about Gandalf. But with Halbrand, a lot of people are. I've seen people in comment sections and on Twitter assuming that he's definitely Sauron, and I think the jury is definitely still out on that.
Oh, definitely. I think it's a little too early to be like certain about it, but it does feel like it does. But I think some like Google Blitz in the comments said it's like it is a little bit on the nose. Like the lingering look, the saying. I think one of the men asks him, like, "What's your name?" And he's like, "Oh, I have many names." I'm like, that's so suspicious.
Yeah, that was another one. Yeah,
Yeah, but
that
like that could also mean he's Turin reincarnated. Like, it doesn't...
That's right. I mean, with Tolkien,
Tyrion's got more names. That's true.
Everybody has a million names, so it's not like a definite thing, but it is kind of like.
It does seem like they're making that connection because they specifically call out the Sauron having many names.
Yes, exactly.
You know, in the Elvish, the what's his face, Arondir storyline.
Yeah, but I don't know. It is a little bit obvious, especially in this episode.
Yeah, and then so we get the scene in the restaurant with the Númenórean nobles, and this was the first scene that I really actually disliked in this episode, because it felt a bit odd for him to have so much money so quickly after arriving.
It's got to be in that pouch, though.
Well,
it's got to be from the pouch around his neck, and it's probably we're looking at a precious metal economy, not like the fact that it's not stamped with Númenórean stuff does not necessarily mean it's not spendable. Right.
True. I mean, well, currency seems to be something that Tolkien wasn't really interested in including in his exercises in world building whatsoever.
It's been super exhausting, I'm here to tell you.
And so how that works is up in the air. So I mean, you can say perhaps in the pouch that's what he had. He had money,
or maybe he just
that explains
stole
it. Or maybe he stole it and we didn't see that. But it did seem as though maybe like he had a lot of money because there was a lot of people in that outdoor bar or whatever it was.
This like pile.
But anybody who's ever played D&D can tell you that you can buy a lot of drinks for a few gold coins at most places. So it's not like, considering how cheap it is to manufacture beer in the ancient world, it's not that huge a deal.
We do find out later on that he potentially was. I mean, we don't know whether this is kind of misinformation, but potentially he was the heir to a kind of royal line in the Southland. So perhaps he had money.
The fight scene
where he came from.
The fight scene that directly follows this kind of only makes sense if he's got some training on him.
Oh yeah.
Like there's no way that he beats up 5 Númenóreans.
Oh, that was brutal. That was that was more violent than I was expecting this show to get. Actually,
but he's very specific. Like he's not just wailing on these guys; he's hitting them in very It's very strategic what he's doing. He's taking them out systematically. The one guy that was basically a brick wall when he ran up against him, initially, like he completely circumvents the guy's size advantage.
Which is like proof that he knows how to fight all types of people.
Yeah, he's had training and he's probably seen considerable action.
And these guys have not.
in D&D terms, he's probably at least a level 3.
Yes,
which makes me think that he's also fought his fair share of orcs, like Galadriel has.
Yeah.
Well, we know that his homelands have been invaded by orcs, and that he's aware of that. So so I really actually enjoyed the fight choreography because it it made that clear, and it gave us some more information about him, as you say.
It's the best fight choreography of the show thus far. That's including the bits of the elves fighting, like doing the chain fight, which was super cool. But it didn't give me the same kind of vibes that fight did. Like that fight felt real.
Yeah, and it was brutal. You really felt it when he broke the guy's arm on the frame of the door.
I was like, I'm very squeamish, so I was like, I have to look away.
This is a tiny little detail, little filmmaking detail, but the blood left behind on the wall from when he bashed the guy's face in on the wall, right? And then when he gets arrested, and you see him from the side, the blood's still there on the wall, which it's not a huge deal, but that's attention to detail as far as the set dressers go. Like that's a little thing. But,
But his plan fails. His plan to achieve the little kind of blacksmith's pin that he tries to steal from the guy. It backfires, and so he gets caught by the guards and taken away.
It was funny that he literally like had just told Galadriel to stay out of trouble. He's like, find some peace, don't lay low, and then he's over here killing some guys and getting arrested.
and this is why I say, if this guy is Sauron, he's a very incompetent Sauron.
Yeah, no, that's
He's
competent at some things though, and
he seems though like I'm not getting that he's this like. I feel like he's going to be this like antithesis to Aragorn and be like, you think that he's going to be this king that can, like, when him and Galadriel have the conversation and she's kind of encouraging him to redeem his bloodline. Like, that's definitely not going to happen.
I doubt it.
Speaking of bloodlines, that's actually the second time that's the third time I'm going to say that's come up, because the first time is way back in episode 1 at Ostirith, and the watch captain says something about the blood of the darkness from the first age being in the blood of the people of the Southlands. And I am a little nervous about that, because that's followed up by the bit where Theo's blood activates this like the sword
mythical
and it's like, and I haven't seen a lot of discussion about that, but I'm like, are they saying that that's true? Are they saying he's right about that? Because
really does still run
that's a choice.
We don't know enough about that sword yet. Although it was mentioned at one point in this episode that the orcs were looking for something, possibly a weapon. So I wonder whether we're supposed to think about that at least.
That was an odd conclusion to jump to, I think.
There's a kind of a leap of logic that's happening there, because the orcs aren't really kind of, expositing anything particularly. They're ordering them to dig.
Yeah.
Right. And that Arondir, like it kind of feels like Arondir asks that question because the writers know stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But maybe they're looking for that sword hilt. It was the first thing that my mind jumped to. But it was a little bit.
I think that was intentional.
Oh, yeah, but like Arondir doesn't know about it. So.
Right.
So the next scene, we've kind of already talked about it a little, is Elros's library, but what we didn't talk about was the Mark of Sauron. And so Galadriel discovers the mark that she's been tracking and trying to look for is actually it's a kind of depiction of the map of the Southlands, or Before Door, as Twitter has dubbed it.
There's somebody in the community who is like really, really adamant that was the case.
I think Nerd of the Rings
predicted
Matt,
it. Yes.
Matt predicted it.
That's what I thought.
I think other people probably said it as well. I don't know, but
because I hadn't even thought of that until I heard him. I was like, "Yeah, it does kind of look. Yeah, okay."
Yeah.
I didn't see which video he predicted that on, but I did see him talk about it on Twitter. So Shout out Nerd of the Rings. It was a very quick sort of discovery that just took place in Galadriel's mind, and then she linked one thing to another, and then suddenly she's reading the Black Speech on the rag there, and we suddenly find out that Sauron's plan is to essentially invade Before Door and turn it into his own kingdom for evil.
Into After Door.
Yeah, After Door. Quite right.
Renovations already underway.
Oh yes, I mean, I think we're going to get a catastrophic scene in the finale where we see potentially Mount Doom erupting, and we see corruption start to happen there on a grand scale. I think it's going to be epic, and it's going to be it's going to be terrifying, and it's going to be the climax of the last episode, and then we're gonna see Sauron at that point too. But as for this scene, what did you have any thoughts on how quickly she gets to that conclusion, or kind of like the setup for it?
I did not actually have
like
any problem with that, actually.
Yeah, I feel like it would make sense for her to immediately assume the Southlands because Halbrand has just told her that
Right.
he's from the Southlands. Southlands, that's where the orcs are. So, and I mean, she's pretty old. She's pretty experienced. I was a little bit like, why do they have a map in Numenor of the Southlands? Like, I'm not sure if that is weird. Like on that table,
they've collected a bunch of stuff in their travels, it looks like, and this is something that they have but haven't really investigated because nobody there knows the Black speech,
right?
So it's like
lore-wise, it's a little early for Black speech to exist.
Yes,
which I kind of wondered whether that was a mistake because
I didn't clock that.
I don't think that I think they're just saying that Black speech already exists. So they're essentially saying, hey, this is another thing we changed.
So. Yeah. I mean, it's not a big problem. It's just, I don't know. I wonder whether it's a kind of sort of, they've missed an opportunity to introduce Black speech later on and use that in some way later on by doing that. But it's just not a big deal.
No, I didn't even. That didn't even occur to me.
I thought about it and I was like, all right, okay, yeah. I mean, because I basically my brain, because this is what I do, right? And so my brain just ticked through all the like, what are the consequences of this action further down the road? And I was like,
I guess, yeah. I kind of did this.
It's the Black speech is on the One Ring, which is not that far off. So
that's true.
True enough. Yeah, true. Yeah. All right. So then we cut to the Harfoots, and so we get quite a long sequence with the Harfoots, and so this is where pacing is becoming a pressing issue again.
This is the same thing that I mentioned earlier about episode
at the start,
1.
Right?
But again, here's the difference. I enjoyed the Harfoots sequence a lot more than I did the Southland sequence, and so it kind of mitigated the problem, right? And it may be that I was just more invested in these characters already because we had already met them.
Yeah, and you want to know you want to know who the stranger is. You want to know what's going to happen because her father has broken his foot. They're about to migrate. Like they've gotten you invested in that story, so that when you switch back to them, you're like, oh, I was wondering what happened, kind of thing.
Yeah, and when people are telling me their favorite character from the show, I feel like they're sleeping on Largo. Like Largo is like holding up that entire community on his cheery little shoulders. Like he's always fixing something. He's always helping somebody constantly every time you see him. And he believes in Nori so implicitly.
I appreciate that like so much. I feel like in a lot of media, female characters, and there's a whole discussion about the addition of all of these female characters and what that means for everything, but I love that they're not going with a lot of these tropes of her being this kind of like rebellious person and how she makes so many mistakes and he always defends her. I personally love Nori so much. I just relate to everything that comes out of her mouth. She has some of the best lines, like what's the line about friendship when she says the stranger's a friend, and I just love that he is so supportive. And I'm not sure if Marigold is meant to be her stepmother or her real mother.
It's made clear in episode
that was
3.
The impression that I got, but the fact that they are obviously so comfortable with each other, like Marigold scolds her, and she obviously treats her as a mother. I love the way that they're taking that story.
Yeah. I love that we're not doing dumb dad.
Yes.
He's not the smartest.
But he's so supportive. He's not like unaware of these flaws of hers. And he's like there's no, I hate miscommunication tropes so much. And I appreciate that they're not going that direction with this.
Yeah. And Marigold is very practical and she's very, she still very clearly loves Nori, right? But she does not have the same confidence in her that Largo does,
right?
And like Largo's, he's my man. Like he's
Yeah.
like when I feel like he's destined for death, and I'm gonna be so sad when like I get like I'm seeing that shaking out already.
Yeah.
You know, he
well, it's not looking good for him at this point in the episode, but things are slightly
Yeah.
looking up by the end, so we'll see.
Yes.
Just I'm very worried for all of the Harfoots because they've gotten me. They've hooked me. I'm invested.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there was that line in the second episode where Poppy says, "Oh, this guy could be dangerous," and you think, "Yeah, he's definitely dangerous. Whether or not he's good or bad, he's very dangerous."
Well, Gandalf says that whole bit. It's like, well, yes, of course the forest is dangerous, and Aragorn is dangerous, and Legolas is dangerous, and you, Gimli, yourself are in your way dangerous, and of course I am dangerous, more dangerous than anyone you'll beat, unless you're brought before, Sauron himself.
Yeah.
Yes, of course he's dangerous.
Yeah.
This episode made me feel, we haven't really got to the stranger yet, but I'm just going to go for it. It made me feel like it's very unlikely that this is. There were hints that maybe there was some Sauron, possibly, in some of the second episode stuff, because on account of the fiery eye imagery that we saw in the trailer early on, which may have coloured my perception of that whole scene, because I thought straight away that looks like an eye. Because of the fact that it's weird for a wizard to land in Middle Earth on a meteor and not sail there on a boat. Because of the fireflies dying. Because of numerous things, and just because of the sinister kind of tone of some of those scenes, and also we get a few notes of Sauron's music, some of his score in some of those scenes, just as an undertone to some of those scenes. So I wondered whether this is Sauron, but after this episode, I'm abandoning that theory. I think because it seems unlikely that that's where we're going now.
Again, with the Halbrand Sauron hints, I feel like they're similarly dropping Gandalf stranger hints. I'm not crazy about him being Gandalf, but again, it's not going to ruin it for me. I'll just kind of be like, oh, okay, they're changing that. Like, it is what it is. But I just feel like there's so many hints, and I do like, he felt very sympathetic in this episode, like the scene where he's stumbling around and kind of pops his head out. I was like, oh, like I genuinely was like, I feel so bad for him. Like it hurt me to see him like stumbling and hiding, and I don't know.
But by the way, and this is why I think that Nori, the actress, I forget her name, the actress who plays Nori, she is
Marcella Kavanaugh.
Yeah. From my money, she's the best actress on the show. And I'll tell you the moment that convinced me of that. And that's back in episode 2 when the stranger wakes up, right? And he grabs her hand and she's screaming and he's screaming. And there's this moment, there's just terror in her eyes, like for a moment. And then there's this moment when you can see her realize that he's terrified also. And that he's confused and scared. And you can see her, she's still screaming, right? But you can see a shift to pity in her eyes. And it's this beautiful, subtle thing. And you see that a few times where she expresses these tiny, tiny, subtle little shifts in her attitude. And you know exactly what that shift was. Right?
That's also good direction as well.
Yeah. But the actor has to know how to make their face do that, because I sure can't. Like a director could tell me to do that all day long, and that's not going to happen.
Right. I also think she's a good actor. There's a lot of good actors in this show, actually, frankly, and some that we haven't seen enough scenes of to judge them. In terms of the totality of their performance, but we've gotten a lot of Nori. I do wonder whether next episode we'll get a lot less Harfoot stuff, because it seems like they cut Elendil, they cut Elrond out of this episode, and we're probably going to pick up with him next episode. So something has to give in the next one.
Well, I've seen the episode 4 trailer, and there's definitely some Khazad-dûm stuff in there. And I'm super it's funny, the Khazad-dûm stuff from the last episode, like that was stuff that even the people who were like huge naysayers were like, actually, I kind of like the
Oh,
Khazad-dûm plot line
yeah.
because it's really hard.
I run the dishwasher.
That's nice. I'm so glad to hear that. You need to go upstairs. Thank you.
Oh,
She ran the
That's so
dishwasher.
cute.
So the I forget what I was saying. Go on. Oh, yes, Khazad-dûm. Yeah, even the naysayers were like, you know, that was actually quite good. All this other stuff is terrible, but that was actually quite good. It's like, well, okay, that was the best. That was the strongest part of the strongest episode up until that point.
Yeah.
Right. And they're still suffering from pacing issues. All that stuff is dropped right in the middle of the episode. Right. And let's not even talk about bunny sledding Elrond and Celebrimbor. That's a whole nother thing. For those not in the know, bunny sledding is what you call when characters from the Hobbit films appear magically on radically different spots in amounts of time that they couldn't possibly have traveled back. Anyway.
Oh, so like them going from Eregion to Khazad-dûm, just kind of strolling.
Oh, it's worse than that. Them going from Linden to Eregion to Khazad-dûm.
True.
In the day and night that it takes Bronwyn to get from Tir Harad to Hordern and back.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that journey would take weeks if you think about it.
It's 100 miles from Eregion to Khazad-dûm.
Yeah.
And we also know that we're going to have Galadriel show up at in the Southlands with her cavalry charge that we've seen in the trailer.
Yes.
With Halbrand. And so in that same amount of time, she's sailed almost to the precipice of Valinor, swam for most of an episode, fought a sea monster, been to Numenor, spoken to the Queen, been to somewhere else in Numenor, which is a quarter day's ride outside of the city.
Yeah.
And then sailed back.
Yeah, I haven't done a timing analysis of episode 3 yet.
Once you start thinking about it, it does start to fall apart.
Yeah. And also I'll be a little irritated if that sea monster never shows up again. Because if all it did was if all it exists for is to separate Galadriel from these unhelpful humans that we needed to see in order to have that whole scene play out without it being Halbrand, somebody that they needed you to like, I'm going to be a little irritated. I'm just saying. Won't ruin the show for me. I'll just be a little irritated.
Yeah.
So Nori steals the star maps from Sadok. And so there's a really lovely scene where Poppy puts her head through the door and she's giving her hints of where it is with her kind of haphazard dialogue with Sadok. And he's completely mystified by it and falls for it. And she sneaks out, which I think it was really nice. I do like the Harfoots, but I do feel like we spent a bit too much time on them in this whole sequence. But
because we didn't go anywhere else because we couldn't, because we hadn't seen them for over a half an hour. Like it's the same issue. Like if you feel like we spent too much time with them, it's because they didn't spread it out and you wound up. So essentially each of these plot lines has its own tension curve, right? And what winds up happening is that different plot lines don't match each other on the tension curve. So you feel a lot of this going on.
Yeah.
So anyway, and not everybody's going to notice that, but also a lot of times people will notice it without noticing it. Like they notice how it makes them feel, but they don't necessarily know why that's happening. Because so much of TV writing it's such a craft. It's such a mechanical thing. And when you deviate from the way it's done, and yes, you can, and you should at times deviate from the way it's done. But when you do it, you're taking a risk.
Especially in an ensemble show like this with multiple locations and a very large, wide world, it's a little bit of an exercise in kind of like whack-a-mole. You're kind of like you're just hitting one and one pops up somewhere else, and you're kind of like trying to dot your
Yeah.
I's and cross your T's, and it's all just a little bit difficult to manage sometimes.
The
Right.
last season of the Silmarillion film project was season 5. It's when the men show up, right? So up until season 5, no humans whatsoever. Now season 5, we introduce humans. We introduce Haleth. We introduce Beor. We introduce Hador. We introduce Andreth and Adonel and all these characters, right? And now all of a sudden, in addition to the Elvish plot lines that we've been following, which there's probably about 14 different plot lines that are being followed throughout season 4. Now there's these additional ones, and to make them have continuity in the way that the season impacts you was a big job. And so that's kind of the same line that they're trying to walk here. They're trying to make, or should be trying to make sure that the things hit you similarly as you progress through the episode and through the season, because otherwise it feels jarring. And sometimes you can use that whiplash to a particular effect, but you got to be thinking about it. You got to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to get back to the plot here and get us back on track with the episode. So the festival is interrupted by the stranger, and he shows up at the back. They've carried on with the festivities, and he kind of slips in, and he's got some kind of page with some Elvish kind of Tengwar on it, and the specific star constellation that he's been searching for. So it's not explained where that came from or where he got it from, seemingly.
It's the pages that Nori grabbed. So she left them somewhere off to the side with the intention to go back with Poppy and go over them. But he's wandered into the camp because he knows that she was going out looking for that, and he finds them. He finds the pages first. That's
so it wasn't clear to me from the editing how he got that, though.
Yeah, it's very dark.
That was what I assumed, but we'd not seen that, and it was kind of, it looked like he'd just torn a page out of somewhere. So that was what I assumed, but it's not entirely clear to me.
Yeah.
And I'm right in thinking it was Tengwar on that page, right? It looked like it.
I didn't get a close enough look. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to watch that scene again.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody in the chat can help us out here, and somebody who noticed the
But I
page.
Really love the "We Wait for You" bit. It had a very Mad Max feel to it, like not Mad Max in general, but there's pieces of Mad Max that do a similar thing beyond Thunderdome with the kids, where they're remembering their roots and how they got to where they are. And there's something really, really nice. I remember, so I grew up in New York, and I remember, and this is probably still done somewhere, but for years, there would always be some sort of ceremony at Ground Zero where they would read off names of people who died during the 9/11 attacks. And that kind of resonated with me that way. Nessa, do you want to just say hi so you can get out of your system and then you can go? No? All right, then you got to go.
Oh. Well, say hi to Nessa from me. Oh. All right, I'm going to carry on with the episode here, and Nori's caught. Obviously, the stranger kind of in a wonderfully slapstick way, kind of accidentally sets his page on fire.
Right.
And
I felt so bad for him. Like, you can see the panic.
Yeah, I don't think he understood what. It's very strange because it seems like he understands, the star constellation, and that he has some understanding of, what's happening in terms of her searching for that and bringing it back and trying to investigate that whole thing, but he seems to not understand what fire is because there was the line in the second episode where he was repeating over and over mana ure mana.
Where is fire?
It sounds
or what
like
is fire?
What is fire?
Yeah.
I said in my video last week that potentially he was saying mana with mana, with a longer A
Yeah.
syllable, and that he was saying blessed fire, and that maybe it was
The
a
sacred
reference
fire.
to,
Yeah,
like
I mentioned that
the
in
flame imperishable, or something along those lines, and that would potentially make some kind of sense. But maybe he was asking what is fire, because he seemed to not understand the concept, because he
or like
because
how
he
to make it stop.
he was holding his fire. He scrap of paper there, and he didn't
waving.
He didn't realize that it was combustible. It didn't seem so. So it's a mess, and he makes a mess and causes a scene, and the Halflets discover him.
Yes,
and he kind of rises up, and there's a giant, and they all hide, which is great. Like the way that they do that, they just instinctively kind of bonker down, and they all hide, and then
and poor Nori gets ratted out immediately.
Right, exactly. Nori. And so she gets in trouble. And Sadok tells her that her family will be at the back of the line when they migrate, which I didn't love, I'm going to be honest. So I have some thoughts on this, and I'll lead off and you guys can chime in. But so hobbits, right? Hobbits are our everyman. They're our character that we see this world through. They're who we relate to. And what the wonderful thing about hobbits is that they can be petty and they can squabble, but they have a heart and they have a soul to them, and their kindness and their kind of spirit of charity is what draws Gandalf to them in the lore of the books. And so if this is proto Gandalf and this is explaining his connection with the hobbits, it seems a little bizarre that we're getting a proto Hobbit society that leaves people behind and just kind of leaves people essentially to die out there in the wilderness. And I don't love that portrayal of the Halflets, that aspect of just, okay, this guy's injured, we can't save him, let's leave him. It seems like they should and could go the extra mile to try to save this guy's life. And so by leaving them at the back of the line, he's essentially signed their death warrant. I don't remember the exact line from Marigold, but it was sad, and it was unfortunate and sad, and I'm sure people were moved by it. But for me, it just didn't feel like hobbits. And that's compounded by the fact that hobbits in the Lord of the Rings and in the Hobbit they're anachronistic. They don't really belong in Middle Earth. And yet seeing these proto hobbits is kind of the justification that they seem to have, at least in the marketing material and in the interviews that we've seen, is that, you know, in Middle Earth, we want to see hobbits because this is what we know. But these are not the hobbits that we know. These are very different hobbits. And so, I don't know. I didn't love it.
So, I agree that the people getting left behind thing has some issues. I don't feel that we have enough context to really understand what that means. Because you think about it, like, these people have no power to affect anything. You know, if somebody, and Sadok mentioned someone who I think is his wife, who was lost to wolves.
I think.
Seems like it, yeah.
Right. And there's a moment there where you kind of see him kind of like, and that actor is just so subtle in his delivery, right? That there's just this hint of like he's preparing to say her name.
Yes.
And he can't even say what happened to her in full. He just says wolves. Everybody else, he gives a little description. Go on.
He does nail that scene. The only problem I have with him a little bit is that he's very famous in the UK. Lenny Henry is like a household name here.
I gotcha.
And so he does break the fourth wall for me a little bit sometimes.
So, but
go on. I talked for a long time there.
No, you're fine. The thing where they specifically seem to be preparing to leave behind the Brandyfoots. It's possible that that's intentional, that he deliberately put them at the back of the line so that Nori could help her friend without causing problems for the rest of the group, right?
True.
That he's like, okay, you guys do what you need to do out of sight from everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. And he doesn't say that because, like Muriel, he is bound by his position.
Yes, because he's already gone against what I think Malva or the rest of the hobbits want him to do, which is to like they want Nori to be punished, and he kind of goes, well, you know, she is pretty young, so like let's cut her some slack, I guess, and put them at the back, not just totally caravan them.
I'm not gonna come out and say that that's definitely what's happening here, but I think you can make a strong case, at least based on what we've seen, that he is deliberately separating them from the other Harfoots for that purpose.
Yeah.
Well, he's very educated, clearly. I mean, there was an allusion to
Elendil. I've heard of people turning into shows, not the other way around. I was like, oh, I know that reference.
And that's a pretty deep cut, like the fact that he would even know that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it
requires some explanation.
I think it is kind of explained because he's watching the skies. He has this book of predictions and stuff like that. Like he's obviously kind of their lore keeper. He's like the elder who has all of this knowledge. So it's not like hard for me to imagine that maybe this is like some passed down knowledge or knowledge that he's obtained. Like they know of the existence of elves and men and dwarves and stuff. They're not completely isolated. So they've obviously had run-ins with either friendly people or maybe like something in the chat suggested there's different groups of them. So maybe they've kind of exchanged knowledge because he mentions, Largo mentions that when he first saw Marigold, and it doesn't seem like their tribe is super big. So,
my read of Sadoc's book is that because they're like individual pages, right? Is that they're pages that have been stolen or acquired over centuries of wandering, and like the lore keeper position guy has, found pages over the years and added them to the book, right? Added them to the proto Red Book of Westmarch, right?
Right. I wonder whether they have their own version of the Elendil myth.
That's true.
We know from the Lord of the Rings that the hobbits do have a kind of rudimentary mythology, and obviously it's noticeable that they have pubs that are named after a dragon, and we have one thing that I was talking about the other day on another stream on the Philosopher's Game channel was the Man in the Moon song that Frodo sings in The Prancing Pony, and the possible connection that could have in Hobbit folklore to the events of this show. It would make a kind of nice sort of connection there if that tale came originally from something earlier Hobbit history that perhaps was forgotten over time, but some kind of oral history was passed down, and it could make some kind of nice sense. There could be a connection potentially to another Maya who not many people are talking about, but Tilion, the man in the moon, the literal man on the moon. And so it's a nice theory that kind of, I'm not the only person to have pointed this out, I don't think, but that kind of element of Hobbit folklore, and it's nice that they're kind of thinking about these things. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I love that they have this established culture that each of these, they've given each of these races a culture. And I studied anthropology in college, specifically cultural anthropology. So this is really interesting to me. I'm sort of like, oh my gosh, like this all, it makes perfect sense for this kind of wandering nomadic tribe of folk that, can't hunt or fight or, do anything that the bigger folk can, that they would have these sort of rules in place to keep the whole of the society together. Yeah. I don't love that they are kind of priming to leave people behind. It does kind of, I feel like on the surface level, it doesn't make sense to have sung this song like nobody walks alone, and then to have this whole list of people that were left behind. But
Yeah.
I do get the sense that as they are this very vulnerable group of people, that these rules would be, in their minds, necessary in order to protect most people. I feel like it would make sense that they, if there are wolves or if there's an avalanche, that they just have to move on because they have no power to change these events of nature.
That's specifically what I was making reference to. And as I said, the season 5 of SilmFilm was all about early men. And in preparation for that, I did a lot of, I learned a lot about early humans and whatnot. And I found myself at points being moved emotionally by just the struggle of people's lives and how comparatively easy my life is. And I have not had a super easy life for a modern human, but by comparison, nobody I know has been eaten by a bear. So that's a win.
Yeah. And I do love the scene where they're, I like that it's not explicitly spelled out. Like, I appreciate that the show doesn't assume that we're dumb, and that it lists the names of Poppy's family and kind of shows her, and you understand that this is her family that has all been killed, and that's why later we see her pulling her cart all by herself. It was really sad. I was like, wow, they're already, the showrunners have said multiple times that they're going, in order to have lost something, you have to have something to lose. So they're building up all of these families and friendships and things, and it's already getting me. Like, I already was like, Poppy, no, her family.
Okay. We need to move on to Elendil and his family. And so it's another father figure. As I said at the beginning, this is a running theme in the episode, and that's why the title is the clever title that it is. We've got Largo, and now we're getting Elendil and his family unit. And so we get a bit more time with the children again. Isildur seems to be reluctant to continue his sailor training, and he, by all evidence that we've seen thus far, he seems to be not cut out for it, and maybe he's cut out for something else. It's not necessarily spelled out to us exactly what it is that he wants to be doing. It's kind of left unsaid, and Elendil kind of jumps to a conclusion based on what is talked about.
But the audience knows, though. She goes like, well, I listened to him, so
I listen sometimes, and I worked it out. Right. Kind of a dig at his kind of fathering skills, I suppose. It's kind of sassy of her, and I liked it. And so she seems a very interesting character so far. There's been rumors that we're going to get a kind of romance subplot between her and Farazan's son.
Oh, Kemen.
Which should be very interesting if that's true. Because it's going to divide some loyalties in this whole family unit. So we'll see how that plays out. And the other thing that we learn about her is that she is training to be in the Builders Guild, and she's an architect, presumably. It seems to be the implication. In one of the trailers, I think one of the trailers that we did together, we were talking about this because
architect mean, and what is this whole made up system?
So I wonder whether she's going to end up building something important at some point. And that could be Temple of Sauron, or it could be Minas Tirith later on.
That would, I mean,
depending on which direction we go in there with her.
How many fanboys that would just piss off if a woman designed Minas Tirith.
The fact that bothers people. I know. I just can't with some of these people.
I do love that they've name dropped an Audion, though. I was not expecting that at all. I give her his plot line, which I wasn't crazy about, but I was like, oh, he does exist. And obviously something has happened between him and the rest of his family. And because Elendil basically says, like, the past is in the past.
Yep.
Interesting to get the context for that line, because that was also in the trailer as well, or one of the trailers. Was that the same trailer that we did before on this channel? I want to say it was. I think so. It's very intriguing.
The
I'm
sea's
loving
always right.
Elendil so much so far.
Yeah.
The sea is always right. That's a little ironic, isn't it?
It's an interesting thing to say because it actually also ties into the Left Behind, like the Left Behind thing with the Harfoots. Like that's sometimes just the will of the world.
Yep.
You know, and I'm sorry, we skipped right over this, I think, or did we not yet? Did we do the bit where Galadriel talks to Halbrand in the jail yet?
That is the next scene after this.
Okay, all right, I'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, we can move on to that now.
Okay,
Did you want to make a point about that in particular, Rob?
I am shocked. I'm shocked that it seems that Galadriel is making a direct reference to Eru Ilúvatar and the providence of the creator god that you see woven throughout the entire story from beginning to end, from like the invisible hand that pushes Gollum over the edge into the fire, right? You know, like all the way through there, and that she is making reference to that here and saying, look, I know that you people don't want to talk about this. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But there is something really, really powerful at work here. And it's not some sort of esoteric
fate. She's like all of the things that you won't name or something like that. Yeah. It's like, does that mean she's referencing like Eru? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she is. She definitely is.
She's gotta be. Like, what else could it be?
There's no other conclusion to that. And I was actually shocked by that too. I wasn't, open jaw shocked. I didn't have a physical reaction, but I was kind of intellectually shocked.
Oh yes, and that was
It's something that no other Tolkien adaptation has really done that explicitly, aside from maybe the line at the end of the animated Hobbit. Which it's actually it's at the end of the Peter Jackson Hobbit as well, where Gandalf talks about Bilbo only being a small fellow in a wide world, and that whole kind of thing.
Which
but this is even more explicit.
Nori references that in the scene where she gets in trouble that we mentioned earlier. She mentioned, I know I'm only a little person in the grand wide world, right? And I'm not special, which is like Bilbo's not special. Frodo's not special. Sam's not special. Right?
Yeah.
That
sounds a little bit special.
Right? Yeah, it's fair. It's fair.
No, I love that.
But that doesn't mean that you don't have any part to play in the story that is the world.
Yes. And I love that she's so confident in knowing that this is what she wants. I can.
Google Blitz is making another good point here in the chat. They're going to have to be more explicit about the Valar / Eru in this because of what happens to Numenor.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's a fair
She
point.
has mentioned, she did say the Valar. When she's talking to Muriel, she says like the Valar gifted this, and Muriel kind of like fights back against that claim.
Yeah,
but
I think both of them are wrong about their interpretation there, because to say that they earned it is not really like. Elros would not have thought of it that way.
Right.
There's no question. And Galadriel is super oversimplifying the situation when it's because of the elves that you got. The elves had nothing to do with it. You guys were busy hiding out to get away from Morgoth. The only people who
I suppose technically Círdan the Shipwright does provide ships for them to get there, so you could, but that's not what she means, is it?
No, it's not. Like she's saying, it's because of your alliance with the elves, which is what she tells Halbrand, and that's not really true, is it?
I think she's taking it all personally. Like I took from the conversation with Halbrand and the conversation with Muriel, she takes it as a personal affront that the elves have been turned away from Numenor. And whether it's because of her connection to Elrond, I could see kind of that playing into it, especially with how they treat her, because she's like, I know the guy who who founded this whole kingdom, and you're treating me like this, like there's
a difference in there's a difference in perspectives here, isn't there? Because Muriel has, a limited mortal perspective, and she only has the society that she grew up in and whatnot. But Galadriel has seen the gradual decline, and so she remembers Numenor when it was an elf-friendly place, and so she's seen that decline. So perhaps that's where that comes from to an extent. And it is a difficult position for her to be in too, because she doesn't quite know what to expect. She probably has preconceptions about how hostile Numenor has become to the elves and to the Valar.
Yeah.
And so she probably doesn't know that there's this strain of faithful.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And we see her learn that later on with Elendil. So I suppose that's where that scene comes from. But yeah, she visits Halbrand in prison, and so she has this she's learned in the Hall of Law that he is connected to this line of this warrior in the past who had united the groups and the factions in the Southlands, and that had tried to redeem the bloodline, and that ultimately that had failed. And the implication is that because of that sigil, which is still a little bit I'm still uncertain what that sigil is supposed to depict exactly. But because of that sigil, and because Halbrand carries that around his neck, she puts two and two together and realizes that he is potentially the heir to this kingdom, and that he comes across her path for a reason, which is how she leads into the Eru Iluvatar reference, essentially.
Yeah. I loved that line between them where he says, my bloodline stood with Morgoth. I can't, redeem this. And, we lost the war. And she's like, my family started the war.
and he says, I'm
technically true either.
Right.
Well, no. Yeah, that's not.
He did kill her grandfather. Just saying.
Yeah.
But
I don't find it unbelievable that she would blame Feanor for everything. Like I think that's
of course,
pretty canon for their relationship, that she would blame him for everything.
I'm gonna be kind of shocked if there is no flashback to the request for 3 hairs from her head at some point, because they have the actress that they brought her in for for a certain amount of time. I would be shocked that they haven't already filmed something about that. Just to keep in their back pocket, even if it's not in this season.
Interesting.
Oh God, if we see Feanor on screen.
He's mentioned several times in Lord of the Rings, so
yeah, it's not impossible that we could see him have a cameo. We probably won't see, like a real. We've already seen a kind of bastardized version of the Oath of Feanor with Finrod taking part in it. Was a little odd. The line that Halbrand has about how he's not the hero that she's looking for, I can just see that as being a gotcha line later on, where he'll say, I warned you, I'm no hero.
Oh yeah, this is a conversation.
At some point when she betrays him,
she's going to regret. I feel like it's going to be one of those things where, when the inevitable, betrayal happens, that she's going to look back on it and be like, ooh, I should not have encouraged him to do this. Like, I kind of shot myself in the foot here.
I mean, and I think that's the most honest statement that he's made to her the entire time. When he says that, because he's letting his guard, he's opening up and letting her see him.
But it's a mistake for her to not take his word for it. And I think she's going to regret it.
But I don't think it's a mistake, because I think that you have to give people that chance to hurt you.
Yes.
That that's very specifically a Tolkien theme, and because the whole thing with Frodo and Gollum is all about that. Frodo gives Gollum a chance to hurt him. And he's right to do so.
Right.
So perhaps the pity of Galadriel will
impact
the fate of many.
Oh yes, I definitely got the sense that was kind of a cornerstone for their relationship kind of scene.
Yeah, I agree.
So the next scene is Muriel climbing the tower and visiting her father, which I this is another scene that kind of shocked me actually, because I didn't think that we would see any of Tar Palantir. I thought that he would just be kind of off screen, and that we wouldn't really see that, or dead, or well, I mean, it was said in the lead up that Muriel was the Queen Regent, so that would imply that there was still a ruling monarch somewhere. But I didn't think that they would want to deal with that too much. And not only do we don't see him, but we see him off camera. He's clearly in the room. And we get a reference to a prophecy that he had made regarding an elf showing up, which is not in the books per se, but we do know that they've extrapolated from what is in the appendices and in potentially in Unfinished Tales about Tar Palantir, that he was a far seer and that he could see future events and that he had a gift of foresight.
Right.
So I loved it. I love that.
They set up. I'm glad that they answered some questions and then set up a little bit more mysteries.
Yeah.
From the Unfinished Tales from the line of Elros here. He was born in the year 3035, and he ruled for 78 years until his death in 3255. Tar Palantir repented of the ways of the kings before him and would fain have returned to the friendship of the Eldar and the Lords of the West. This name Inziladun took because he was far-sighted both in eye and in mind, and even those who hated him feared his words as those of a true seer. So this is from Unfinished Tales. There's a kind of abridged version of this in the Lord of the Rings appendices, but it shows that they've really actually thought about this character, that they've given him this role, and that the Númenórean people have shuffled him off and exiled him in his own kingdom. Makes perfect sense from what's in the book.
Yeah.
So really, really enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to seeing him and finding out more about what his prophecy entails and how that's going to play out.
Definitely.
Anything else to add? No. And so finally we get Harfoot, the marching scene, and the stranger shows up. I think we've already kind of talked about this a bit. So I don't think we'll linger on that too much.
I just felt like another Gandalf reference when he says friend. I was like, Gandalf opens the doors of Eden, so I feel like that was parallel there.
I do think it did seem inevitable from the previous scene with the Harfoots that was going to end up like it did. But it still was enjoyable to see that.
I love Dilly being like, can we bring him on?
Can we keep him?
Can he come with us? I thought that was so cute, where they already all are like, all on board and trusting Mary. That was nice.
And poor Largo, once again, MVP, doing his very best to take care of his family and to get his, because he knows they won't leave him, right? So he has to, he's out there with his broken ankle trying to pull this thing.
I know.
I felt that hard.
He was trying to make it happen with his, broken leg, and just what a trooper. And so the very final scene is the extended fight scene with Arondir and his buddies trying to escape, and so it's quite a complicated piece of choreography that we don't need to break down in massive depth here. My tiny criticism was that the warg looked kind of a little bit claymation-y, which I didn't love.
Was my least favorite part of the episode. Was the warg. It just,
the eyes were too.
It didn't look. It kind of looked like the live-action Sonic,
Yes.
That's a good shout. Yeah.
Before they fix Sonic, he looks like that. I
never would have thought of that, but that's really good comparison.
That's what was bothering me. He looked too anthropomorphic. I think what was bothering me.
And the way he moved, I think, also was not right. The way that he moved when he first appeared, particularly when he was coming out of the tunnels, it just looked claymation-y. And then when we see him up close, he'd look anthropomorphic is the perfect word for it.
And I'm confused. Were the wolves wolves that we saw at the farm and that are in the
All of
trailer
them,
for
yeah.
episode 4, are those not
It looks
wargs?
totally different. It looked like a different
It
creature.
looks.
And
Yeah.
that, yeah,
When you
and
see it like
and that's
sniffing, it didn't look the same.
and it's like that. The warg looked more like a wolf than those did.
Yeah.
So what on earth are those? Because they're not wolves. Wolves don't look like that.
No.
So
Yeah.
I don't really
That's not
know
clear.
what that was all about.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, not a fan of the character design of that creature.
and again, like if it's me making this show with all that's going on, like every I is going to be dotted, every T is going to be crossed, everything. Like I'm going to do my level best to make sure there's not a single continuity error that anybody can find at all.
Right.
That nothing looks stupid.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. No, it doesn't feel like they've thought of all that stuff, which is odd because people have been primed to hate this since it was announced. They've been rooting for its failure. So
Right.
you would think that they would maybe, I don't know, like test a couple of those things, kind of ask around, see if there was anything like the slow-mo scene, or like you said, all of these weird timeline things.
Yeah.
The CG of the warg to be like, is there if it's something really specific that people have picked up on, that's one thing. But if it's just something really easy that anybody can notice looks a little off.
Yeah. And I'm not
You kind of deserve it.
right. Like I'm not a CGI artist. Like I'm none of those things. And I was just like, ugh, that's wrong.
Yeah. It looks kind of like not fully rendered, almost like sort of how Gollum looks now. Like when you look back at Peter Jackson,
it looked.
He looks like
it looked a little bit like.
Have
you ever seen 3D models of like the Ren and Stimpy characters? That's what it looks like.
It look like that.
Like it's like a 3D model of like that ugly animation from the 90s. Yeah, not modern ugly animation. That's another.
I can picture what you're saying though.
Yeah.
Reflective Rambling in the chat is talking about how this is not sure if there's a budget compromise or if this is a thing that's like just this is for families and we can't make the wolf too scary.
I don't know. I didn't feel like this episode was particularly family friendly. Like the guy gets his throat cut.
Yeah, there was people getting like their heads bashed in, and
2 of the elves get like eaten.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. That was
snapping.
shocking to me.
That was shocking that it just tears right into him. So
yeah,
I don't see the warg looking like Sonic to be a concession for it being family friendly.
Not to mention the orc in the last episode, which I wouldn't let my child watch that if I had a child.
Yeah.
Let anybody watch anything, but
although this is probably the only visual adaptation so far of the Legendarium that I would let my kids of reading age watch before they had read the underlying material, because like who cares? Like this is the appendices to Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion stuff. Like that's not spoiler material. Like that's not going to ruin if you're going to enjoy that stuff.
Yeah, from that point of
what's
view,
going to
I see
happen
what
is
you
going to
mean.
ruin it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. From that point of view, you're right. Yeah, I don't want my kids watching the Peter Jackson films until I've had a chance to read them, the Lord of the Rings one day. So I know what you mean. Yeah.
Or else they'll turn out like me. I'm like the movie better.
And that would be a disaster.
That would be the worst thing ever.
So that is more or less the end of the episode. Do we have anything more to add to the final scene? I mean, we get Adar at the end. We could speculate on who he may be, but clearly he's a henchman of Sauron or Revival. It's not clear, but
signs are pointing towards Elf.
I think so. Yeah, I think perhaps we'll get some links in the kind of previous history of some of the characters that are main characters in this. So I think he will be connected to either Elrond or Galadriel in a personal way that we're not aware of yet.
Yeah,
that's my prediction.
Pointed out that if you zoom in on the portrait in the Hall of Lore, On Elrond's side, it's like they each have a couple of people around them, and there's a character that's sort of in the back, in the shadows on Elrond's side, and so people are thinking maybe this is Adar.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. It's interesting.
Maybe. I'll tell you one thing, though. If Adar is of a race of elves that were kind of engineered by Sauron to be in a fallen state, I'm going to be expecting a check because we did that story 4 years ago. I'm just saying.
Get that bag.
He could be an Avari. He could be somebody from like an elf from the east somewhere who grew up in Morgoth's kind of corrupted society in the east somewhere or something like that.
Maybe they'll decide that Eöl survived his fall and this is him. That would be whack. That would be wacko.
That would be crazy. There's almost nothing there that they could do, like in lore, that they could really build on, because Tolkien is very explicit that, like, we're kind of assuming that this is an elvish character, and it might not be, but certainly the sword that he's wielding and that we've already seen in the marketing material looks kind of elvish. Which doesn't have to mean that he's an elf, but for the sake of speculating, I'm assuming that he is at this point. Tolkien is very clear that no elf ever willingly served evil. Not explicitly anyway. I mean, there were elves that betrayed, Maedlin comes to mind, obviously, that betrayed the elves. But he never fought for Morgoth, which is this kind of stipulation that you could say. Except for in the older version from the Book of Lost Tales that he does. But
I mean, of course, there's orcs who, you know, like it all depends on how far gone these people were before that happened. You know,
just want to say, hi Timbo.
If that's somebody who is in a somewhat less fallen state than orcs, like not quite fully orcified.
Yeah, I think somebody, I can't remember who, was speculating that he could be like one of the first elves that Morgoth tried to turn into orcs, if they're going with that origin story of.
That's the SilmFilm story. Just saying.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you might have to lawyer up if they go there. Then
might have to. There's been a few things of like because I happen to know that for example the actor who plays Elendil, Lloyd Owens, he's seen my face apparently, and he knew about an episode that we did. Oh, thank you. You brought me tea. That's very nice of you. So he saw an episode that we did on a frame treatment of a city in Harad. Sauron is the reason for the season, and the
I think I saw that episode as well. Actually, I haven't watched that much of SilmFilm because there's so much of it. But I think I remember the reason for the season thing.
Yeah. So if they start doing, there's certain things that if I start seeing them, like if I see Haradrim Christmas, I'm gonna be like, guys, we need to have a talk. I can be bought with a job.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, maybe we should talk about that a bit more, actually. Just while we've got you, it's like storylines that they have done similar things. What comes to mind? Because I, as I say, I haven't watched that much of SilmFilm. I've caught the odd episode live at times, but it's a long podcast to get into from the beginning.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And we are in, by the way, for anybody who's listening, we are in Beren and Luthien right now. So if there was ever a time to get in without having to catch up, now's the time. Just saying. But the certain things like PTSD Galadriel is something that Corey Olsen talks about a lot as something that we've gone in that direction also. Now, we thought about it a little bit differently as far as the source for that PTSD. And I'm super angry that they thought of vengeful Galadriel first, because I have been looking for a way to kind of back her character progression up a little bit, and seeking vengeance for the death of her brother would absolutely fill the bill. So there's that one. Other things that they've done that are similar to things we've been working on are, well, also kind of recognizing the need to contextualize the situation, which is what the Harfoots are doing. They're giving us a way in that is not high elf lords and, you know, the people in charge. And that's been something that we've recognized was important from the beginning, especially when we were doing the Elendil and Muriel stuff. It's like, we need somebody to tell us this story. So.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to depict that in first person, isn't it? Really, you need to be told that story in a different kind of way.
Yeah, but that's most of it, because we're not in the Second Age yet. So there's a lot of stuff that we're going to have to kind of like, you know, weigh when we get there, because we will then now be behind them, right?
Yeah.
And of course we'll do a much better job, but you know.
Yeah, so Google Blitz has been great in this chat, so I'm just going to read another chat from him. He just says, I've looked up SilmFilm, I'm going to start it tomorrow. I've got to watch from the beginning, though, because I love the start of the Silmarillion. So got you one more viewer today, which is good. And yeah, I do recommend it. As I say, I've not watched all of it myself, but it's great content, and I do commend it to people. And I will also say, the link is in the description as well for the playlist for that, which I don't know how up to date that particular playlist is. I haven't checked it over myself.
Yes,
I know these playlists are. No, I know. Yeah,
YouTube channel. I have a bunch of the script discussions on my own YouTube channel. So if you want to really drive yourself crazy, there's extra hours and hours and hours and hours of stuff that you can watch, which is mostly us just arguing with each other over absolute nonsense. Like, wait, how do we get Elrond and Celebrimbor over here when there hasn't been enough time for us to work that out? So we have to have something else happen. And so,
yeah. Well, we're closing down here. I'm just we've covered that. I just want to give Emily a chance to just plug whatever she's working and cooking, and you're working on any TikTok videos, or if you got any other live stream appearances or anything.
I was live on, they're called the Podwans podcast for the live. This is my live reaction of the show. It's not something that I'm going to do every week just because it premieres at midnight my time. So I would be up pretty late every week, and I'm a grandma. I don't like going to bed late. So, but I believe I will be on there for the 5th episode and the finale, because something that the showrunners have said has been, give us till the 5th episode. Like, if you're on the fence about something, give us till the 5th episode. So that one and the finale. And I'm sure, I know a lot of my TikTok friends do TikTok lives after the episodes. I'm sure I will be on various other things. So if you would like to follow me, I'm silmaremily on pretty much every platform, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. So yeah, I do reviews of the episodes like on TikTok every time they come out, and I'm very active on Twitter as well. So yeah.
So I think I've got Nick's personal YouTube channel there in the chat, because I don't have that in the description. So hopefully people can find that.
Yeah, I do have a video specifically on episode 1 that I just put to bed moments before this stream started up. I'm going to be creating a new YouTube channel specifically to hold all that stuff.
Okay.
So I will start disseminating that information when it exists.
All right. And so most of the links to find these two wonderful people are in the description below. So do check out their content and basically get stuck into the SilmFilm project and silmaremily on TikTok, really. So yeah, thank you both so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and really good to break down this episode with you both. I hope you'll both come back on in the future for other content and other things.
Definitely.
So the door is always open and everything. So yeah, I think I'm done for the evening. It's rather late my time, so I think I'm going to close down. But thank you everybody for tuning in. I'll be back at the same time on the same Bat channel next week to talk about episode 4. I've got about half a guest so far, so I'm looking for people. I see Timbo Took in the chat here, the YouTube painter, the Hobbit painter. So I'd like to get you on, Timbo, but I don't know whether we're going to get Harfoots next week, and I know how much you love Hobbits. So we'll see whether it'll be the appropriate episode for you. But if you'd like to come on in any event, I mean, I'd love to have you on. So I'm looking for new guests for next week, but hopefully we'll have at least 2 more exciting, fun guests. But yeah, that's all from me for tonight, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.